the newly 23rd ranked USC Trojans, who re-entered the AP poll this week, travel to the unranked but bowl eligible Nebraska Cornhuskers. Both teams have 2 losses. USC has lost to Illinois and Notre Dame. Nebraska, they have lost to Minnesota and Michigan. Nebraska 6-2, USC 5-2. The Trojans have to make a grueling trip out to Lincoln after making a trip out to South Bend, but they had a bye sandwich in between those 2 games to rest and prepare for what is a big game, essentially a college football playoff elimination game. The Trojans are favored by 6.5 points here. This will be 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC. Before I continue, liking the video, watching the video all the way through, and commenting your thoughts down below are the best ways to support the channel, as they help push me into the algorithm, help me to receive a larger paycheck that I can use to reinvest in producing elite analysis for you all. Subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, sharing the video around, and supporting us in other ways that you can find out via the description are other awesome ways to support our operation at College Football with Sam. We are becoming the best. We want to be the best. Thank you all for making that possible. The Trojans, I believe that when healthy, they are a top 10 team, and I want to continue to say that and put it out there. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But Illinois, that loss was not all that bad when you consider that they weren't healthy and they were traveling on the road. And that was a must-win bounce-back spot for Illinois that tested their character. Illinois passed the character test. USC nearly won. They had chances to win. Now, if some questionable calls went the other way, I think that Illinois may have dominated. But who USC is, I think, has more to do with what they showed against Notre Dame, Michigan, Michigan State, and Purdue than what they showed against Illinois. And that is a top 10 quality team when they want to be, when they're playing their starters, when they aren't looking ahead. That is who USC is. I picked them to go to the playoffs in the preseason. Right now, with the unexpected loss to Illinois and then losing to Notre Dame, I don't know if I'd pick them to go that far. They'd have to win out. They'd have to beat Nebraska this Saturday, then beat Northwestern Friday, beat Iowa Saturday, beat Oregon on the road, and beat rival UCLA. And that is a tough November stretch. There's no bye mixed in there. And 2 tough road games with, hundreds to thousands of miles of traveling, and 2 opponents that, for Oregon, they're top 5 rated, and Nebraska's top 30 rated. These teams played last year. USC won 28-20, and that was with them surrendering a pick 6. Maeva has improved. Sear Wright has improved. They're going to want this game badly for a variety of different reasons. Nebraska's going to want this game badly. USC will. And that's what makes this game so entertaining. And a loss will be apoplectic to either of these fan bases, because they will know that they will not reach the playoff with a loss here. And that will be hurtful to a USC fan base that at one point thought they were going to go to the playoffs this year and that really wants Riley to break through in that way. It'd be painful for a Matt Rhule-led Cornhusker squad and fan base that said openly in the preseason, we embrace people picking us to go to the playoffs. That is our expectation to reach there. Someone's going to be heartbroken here, and someone is going to be elated from a win. We'll see. USC, though, 6.5-point favorites, and when you look at their schedule in juxtaposition to Nebraska's, you can see why they're the favorites even traveling on the road. Nebraska's best win of the year is a 20-17-point win over Cincinnati. Outside of that, they blew out Akron and Houston Christian, but against power competition, they've either won close games exclusively. Maryland, Northwestern, Cincinnati were close wins. Michigan was a close loss. Michigan State at one point that the Spartans were winning, and then Nebraska just bullied them in the fourth quarter, and Minnesota bullied Nebraska in that second half. This is a good team, maybe above average, at worst average. They're not bad, but they're not a team that is a college football playoff team from the perspective of power ratings. From a schedule standpoint, if they win out, especially with how good Iowa's looked and with USC being ranked here in their power rating, Nebraska could be like Georgia Tech, where you're a fringe top 25 power rated team, but because you've taken care of your schedule for the most part, you could be invited to the playoffs. That's Nebraska's best case scenario at this point. And USC or Iowa, both games at home, will probably be their toughest tasks in terms of quality of team, power ratings, and the coaching staffs they're playing against. Must win for Nebraska here if they want to go to the playoffs. And also, if they want to keep momentum alive. They got to win over Northwestern in a game that Northwestern could have easily won. You don't want to go 6-6 again. You don't even want to go 7-5. You want to go 8-4 or even 9-3. And if you get to 10-2, that's gravy. If you lose here, I have a hard time seeing 9-3, let alone 8-4. Lose here and 7-5, I think, is pretty likely, given some of the matchups and other things I've seen, like some of Penn State's talent, how Nebraska struggled in the trenches, and Penn State at least is competent there, and also how Iowa has looked. A loss here would put you at 8-4 or 7-5, I think. A win here, and you're looking at 9-3, 10-2. I'm pretty sure. So big swing game for the Cornhuskers. And that is where I begin to get speechless, because this is a tough game. So I have two reads here, and I want to dive into them with future content on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I might even do a video per day on this game. Won't promise that, but I might. There are two angles to this game. This game reminds me a ton of a former Pac-12 team traveling out east to play a blue blood in a night game rowdy environment. This reminds me of Oregon traveling to Penn State, with the hindsight added, because in that game I was all on Penn State, was totally wrong here. This game reminds me of that game with hindsight, where I think USC is the better team here. And I think much like how the analytics thought Oregon was better, and I didn't obey them enough, though that was understandable because of, sometimes teams are slow against bad opponents, as Georgia's been in the past, or even Michigan, and they turn it up. Penn State just wasn't that team. But regardless, analytics say USC's better. I believe they're the better team here. I think that it's understandable that they are favored. However, that can go one of two ways. Nebraska steals one in the way that Penn State nearly did. USC plays a close game and wins a close game. Or USC can go in here and burn Nebraska's house down. I don't think that Nebraska in any way, shape, or form is going to win in a blowout. Maybe they control the game or even dominate in the feeling, but it won't be reflected on the scoreboard. USC is too explosive and too good in the trenches relative to where Nebraska is for them to be dominated. They are the dominant player here. It just depends on how they use their cards, how Nebraska plays their cards, and whether or not the travel or the stadium or the will of Nebraska powers them forward. Because I will say, Nebraska has more momentum entering this game than USC does. And Nebraska is probably going to be the more emotional team. And that can play in a positive way. It can play in a negative way. Those are the outcomes I'm looking at, where USC's the better team. It reminds me a lot situationally of Oregon going to Penn State. It's not going to be as critical for Matt Rhule's future as that game was for James Franklin's future, but it is critical, I think, in a lot of ways for Matt Rhule's future. And USC's the better team. It just depends on whether or not Nebraska wins in a close one, or USC controls or dominates much of the game, and regardless of whether they win it close because Nebraska attempts a comeback or USC pulls away, it's the same thing for Nebraska. You're eliminated from the playoffs. The result is effectively going to be the same. You'll either win and be happy with it, or you'll lose and be sad. That goes for both of these fan bases. So let's take a look at the matchups here. For Nebraska, the key players are going to be Emmett Johnson, Isaiah Hunter at wide receiver, and Dylan Raiola. The offensive line improved at pass blocking against Northwestern. We'll see if they can do that against a better USC defense and defensive front that is more talented. I would also pay attention to, for the Cornhuskers, their defensive line. Can they hold their own long enough against this USC offensive line and rushing attack. USC's rushing attack has been mediocre on the road. It's been excellent at home, but it's been very mediocre at home. Deshaun Singleton, Sear Wright, and Andrew Marshall, they are going to have to play a phenomenal game for Nebraska to win. Because, given the defensive line and how it's played, they will likely have to make some tackles and come down and help in run defense, while also making sure they don't get cooked by Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, Walker Lyons, or Lake McCree, the two best wide receivers and two best tight ends that USC will use along with Jaden Maiava. And for USC's defense, Eric Gentry, Kamari Ramsey, and Bishop Fitzgerald, kind of the backfield defenders typically inside the tackle box or just around it for the Trojans, the safeties and linebackers. They're going to have to assist in run defense, cleaning up against a shifty Emmett Johnson. And Raiola has a cannon of an arm. Hunter's made some amazing catches, run some great routes. Dane Key and Ja'Cory Barney are also reliable. They are going to have to help a corner room that struggled, and they're going to have to prevent big plays. Both of these teams want this game. They've both had struggles. USC enters with statistically the number one offense in the country. In actuality, I'd give that to Indiana. I think when you factor in what teams want to do versus what they have to do offensively, I think Indiana's is better than USC's, along with a handful of other offenses. But it's a top 10 offense, a defense that's average. Nebraska's defense is also average. Their offense is just above average. Again, USC is playing as the better team here. I do like both of these pass offenses against the pass defenses, especially Nebraska's pass offense against USC's defense, especially. USC has struggled at times to get pressure, especially on the road. This is a much different team on the road than at home. And the corners have been lackluster for the Trojans. But for USC, we've seen Nebraska's secondary, not really against Michigan or Cincinnati, but as the season's gone on, Preston Stone was able to make some throws, and Northwestern's receivers were able to get open enough to where it's a good secondary, but it's not elite as the early metrics and early returns suggested. We also saw them struggle at times against Minnesota and against Maryland, and not really Michigan State, but that was a weather game. USC is the best pass offense by a mile that Nebraska's played all year. I think they, at times, will have their way. The Trojans will through the air. Their rush offense, especially if O'Connor will start at center, and if he's recovered from his injury that he suffered against, was either Michigan State or Illinois. I think it was Illinois. Yeah, it was Illinois. Especially if that's the case, they will be able to run the ball against this Nebraska run defense. This is a huge John Butler game. Him, first-year DC since 2013 with Penn State. An NFL guy with the secondary defense that struggled at times this year against one of the best offensive minds in football. This is a John Butler game. It's also a D'Anton Lynn game. I think USC's run defense will do just enough because I believe their D-line should be able to eat up Nebraska's O-line in enough plays to keep them off schedule. But Johnson is shifty, and I would expect Nebraska to pull out all the cards necessary to win here. So USC will do enough on D-line versus Nebraska's O-line to force some pressures and to slow down the run. But I wouldn't be shocked if Nebraska has one of their better rushing performances of the entire season in this game. Again, USC when healthy is a top 10 team. But when they have to rotate and when they have to play for a full 4 quarters and maybe suffer some injuries here and there, that begins to rapidly fluctuate. I would argue that Nebraska's backups probably do a better job filling in for their starters than USC's backups do. USC is one of the most bipolar teams when it comes to their starting lineup, and they're too deep. One of the furthest distances between those two in the sport. USC is the better overall team. I do think to this point USC is the better overall staff, but it's not by this vast margin. I will come out and say that I think that the key matchup here is ultimately going to be whether or not Nebraska can run the ball on USC. If they can, then maybe what I said earlier about Nebraska not being able to make it ugly for USC isn't true, and Nebraska can earn a huge win here. If they can't run the ball against USC, I don't see how Rhule, with that O-line and with some of his inconsistencies, is just going to shred this USC secondary enough for Nebraska to win. That's the key here. That's the key matchup. The secondary one is John Butler and his play calls against Lincoln Riley and his play calls. Not even the personnel. Not even the personnel there. Just the play calling between those two. Because I'm not an expert on play calling, I have no idea how that one will go. Would favor Riley there. And with all that being said, and all the different matchups and the quality of team, I do think USC wins. I believe Nebraska covers, though. Much like in the spirit of Oregon Penn State, where Oregon won by 6 in overtime, or they were, in all likelihood, if you play the game over again with the same staff, Penn State probably starts off hotter on offense, and it's a close game. It was a close game. I believe Nebraska will put out an effort, and it will be their second close loss of the season to bring their close game record to 3-2. I wouldn't be shocked if any team wins here. I'm going with USC because I think they're better, and the bye is critically timed. If this was a back-to-back road game stretch, and the Notre Dame game was last Saturday, so just 2 days ago, and you had to have that back-to-back travel, then I would pick Nebraska here. But that bye is so well-timed. It's so well-timed. That is a big swing here to help USC get healthy, to help them rebound and recover. And USC, trench play is one of the things they're not perfect at. The fact they're playing against a Nebraska team where they're weak in the trenches really stands to benefit the Trojans. So Nebraska will cover, but USC will win, probably by a field goal or something. Looking at the Big Ten standings here, Nebraska's outside shot to get to the playoffs would be killed with a loss here. Same with USC. This is a must-needed win for a playoff appearance. If Nebraska wins this game, their odds of going to the playoffs, I would say, are high. If USC wins, they're still pretty low because you got Oregon left on the schedule. Iowa is probably a better team than Nebraska, although they'll have to travel to the Coliseum to play that game after a home game against Oregon. So that'd be a tough back-to-back stretch for the Hawkeyes. But these teams are alive for the playoffs, and this is what college football is all about, is you have goals, and in November, the achievers and the losers are decided. So this game will be one of those matchups that decides who goes home sad and who goes home that is able to survive in advance. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure, if you haven't already, to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, comment your analysis and thoughts down below so I can reciprocate my thoughts with you in the comment section, and check out anything on these end screens that are up here. Whether it's a recommended video or playlists for teams that I'm talking about in a preview, prediction, or a reaction, make sure to hit the notification bell on those, scroll through them, and watch any suggested videos if you are interested. Thank you for helping college football with Sam become the best and the biggest college football brand and channel on YouTube and other social media platforms. We will reach that one day because of your support.